Hello everyone, the Instant Camera Guy here. If you are watching this video, it is either because you are a fan of the channel and have stumbled across some of my latest content, or it is because I am directing you to this video because I want to show you a way that you can shoot SX-70 film in a camera that has either been modified to or natively takes 600 speed film. See, one of the things that I always recommend when I overhaul a client's camera is that you convert it to take either I-type through use of my battery adapter, or at the very least 600 format film. Now, the reason for that is because 600 format film and I-type format film are just objectively better films. And what do I mean by better? I mean they are generally more available, generally cheaper, generally offer much better performance, being smaller aperture and sharper photos in bright scenes, as well as better versatility in scenes with lower light when compared to SX-70 film. And the reason for that is the films are otherwise identical, it's just that modern SX-70 film is basically just 600 film, but with an ND filter material similar to this, but actually baked into the negative itself in order to effectively cripple the ISO down to 160. They are otherwise effectively the same film. And I did an entire video diving really deep into the subject of that if you guys want any further information. But I'm not going to go into much more detail about that. But I strongly recommend that you get your camera converted to take 600 film. And the reason that I've come to that conclusion over the years is that 600 film just gives way less issues from my clients. If I'm recommending people use SX-70 film, then I am always inundated by clients asking me, why are my photos blurry? I tried to take a photo indoors and it used a really slow shutter speed. Yeah, because the film is really slow. The SX-70 only has an f8 lens, and when you combine that with film that is only 160 ISO, it's basically a recipe for meaning that you really need a bright sunny day or a flash in order to get any photos at all from the camera. So I always recommend 600 film just because it's got that better performance. And the only argument that I ever really see about why you should shoot SX-70 film is that arguably it can give you different or better colors. But like I said, I go into that in a heck of a lot more detail in terms of my other video that I linked up before and that I'll link below in the comments. And I really do believe that to be mainly placebo. There are small little variances and differences that you can get between batches of film, but I believe for the most part, a lot of that is simply just a placebo effect. And one of the things that I will always hear people say is, oh, there's no need to modify your camera to take 600 speed film. You can use a filter. And what a filter would do is it would go over the pack of I-type film, kind of like so. It's a little bit annoying to put on. It does help if you then use some tape to secure it in place. And basically what this filter does is it reduces the amount of light going into the 600 speed film, effectively stopping it down and reducing the reducing the ISO down to around 160, which compensates and then allows you to shoot 600 film in an SX-70 speed camera. So if the camera is only calibrated to take SX-70 film, you can manually reduce the light by using a filter like this, or you could put a filter over the lens itself. Now, in my opinion, there is two big problems with that. The first is if you put a filter over the lens, you reduce the light coming into the viewfinder by 2 stops, which will make the camera very dim to focus with. This is an SLR after all, and when you're looking through the viewfinder, you are looking through the lens. So if you put a filter over it, it is drastically going to darken the image that you see through the viewfinder. And if you're somewhere where the lighting is quite dim, it basically makes the camera impossible to use. If you're on a sunny day at the beach, then you're probably going to be okay, but it doesn't make it a nice thing to use. In terms of pack film filters, these things are fiddly. They get fingerprints and dust on them. And if you install them incorrectly, there is a risk that the filter will jam or get picked up by the pick arm. I've never enjoyed using these things. I've always found them to be very, very fiddly, and so I don't recommend them. And one of the biggest criticisms I hear from on the topic of 600 converting a camera is, well, what if I want to shoot SX-70 film again? My camera is going to be modified to take 600 film. How am I supposed to do that? Or, well, I have an SLR-680. What if I wanted to use SX-70 film in it? Well, I'm going to show you guys how to do that because the principle is basically the same. Remember that this filter material just reduces the amount of incoming light by 2 stops. So 640 ISO film effectively gets reduced to 160. It's a factor of 4. 2 stops means we divide it by 4. Well, if your camera is already modified to take 600 film, to take the faster film, it means that we've either installed a new PCB, such as the SX-70R PCBs, of which I install lots for clients. These are basically brand new PCB replacements that are natively compatible with 600 speed film, or it means that we have replaced the capacitor on the original PCB with one that basically speeds up the shutter's integration cycle. Making the shutter perform faster is a lot harder to do than making it perform slower. It needs some kind of electrical modification. And that's why I recommend if you're going to have the camera refurbished, go ahead and get that done because it's only going to be a benefit to you. So once the camera is 600 modified, we can take that same principle and slow down the shutter very easily. Instead of putting the pack of the filter pack, instead of putting the filter over the film or over the lens, we put it over the electric eye. And it does the same thing. If this camera now takes 600 film, or in the case of the SLR-680, it natively always took 600 speed film. If we put a filter over the eye, it's going to reduce the light coming into the camera's light meter by 2 stops. And what that's going to do is trick the camera into thinking that it is darker than it otherwise is. And that will force the camera's shutter to perform 2 stops slower. So the aperture will get a little wider, the shutter speed will go a little slower. So all you have to do is get some of this filter material. And what I like to do is you can buy literally these pack film filters. You can buy them from like Retrospect and Polaroid.com. You can get them from eBay, that kind of stuff. And just cut it off into like a little strip. Or you can purchase some Lee ND filter material. And that's all you got to do. You just cut it into a little rectangular shape and you just literally slide it where the light dark wheel is. Slide it into the electric eye. That is it. What you have now done is effectively converted your 600 modified or 600 capable camera to be able to shoot SX-70 film again. It's as simple as that. Because I get very annoyed when I hear people say, oh, but what if I want to use SX-70 film? Well, in my opinion, you won't want to. Every single client I've ever performed a 600 modification to on their camera has never ever, in my entire history of performing these cameras, conversions to these cameras, no one has ever come back to me and gone, oh, I really don't like the 600 mod. Can you convert it back to take SX-70 film? It just never happened. The film is more convenient to use. The colors are identical, if not exactly the same. And the versatility you gain from a 600 mod vastly, vastly overrides any perceived benefit from using, quote, original film. Now, I do get it if you're someone who's a purist and you absolutely want to reproduce the exact same experience that Andy Warhol would have in the 1970s. I get that, right? I'm not alien to that kind of philosophy. Right? When I play video games, I have a Commodore 64, I have a BBC Micro, and I've got at least 2 computers that can run Windows 98 on original hardware. I get it. Sometimes you like the feeling of the real thing instead of emulation. But in the case of all my vintage computers, I'm using modern solid-state hard drives because I don't want to have the unreliability of spinning rust. And it's no different. In an SX-70, the performance you can get out of 600 converting one of these basically means that it's going to perform on par with the SLR-680. There's really no reason not to do it. The SLR-680, if you look online, you will see people over and over and over again describe this camera as being able to take the, quote, best images of any instant camera. And the reason for that is not because it has autofocus, it's not because it has a built-in flash, it's not because it has a better lens, because the lenses on these two cameras are completely identical. It's the exact same 116mm f8 Tessar formula. The difference is that this natively is designed to take 600 speed film, and this natively is designed to take 160 ISO slower SX-70 film. The second you modify one of these cameras to shoot 600, performance becomes effectively identical. Now, the last thing I wanted to say in regards to the SLR-680 is this will absolutely work with an SLR-680, or if you're the unfortunate soul to have the Japanese-made SLR-690, it will work on that too. The only thing that you now have to be aware of is it obviously won't work for the flash. This flash is designed purely to accommodate for 600 speed film, and in flash mode it is the flash that mainly dictates the exposure. So if you want to use SX-70 film in a 680, you kind of can. You're absolutely going to need to crank the wheel all the way to the lighter side, and you're still going to need to use that filter. You'll probably still get an image that's slightly too dark, but that's the best way that you can do it. And it's just because when you use a flash, it's the flash that's controlling most of the exposure, not the electric eye. Now, if you get yourself a Mint flash bar, these have two settings, one for full power, one they call half power. It's technically 1/4 power because 2 stops is a factor of 4, so it's technically 1/4 power. I really wish Mint would relabel these properly. But the SX-70, when 600 converted, arguably becomes a lot more versatile because you can use a Mint flash on the half power mode if you want 600 with a flash, take the flash off and you got 600 film shooting auto. Or if you want to go the whole hog SX-70, use the Mint flash bar on the full power, it'll expose for SX-70 film. And if you put that little filter in the electric eye, like I just showed you, it works exactly the same. The big advantage to using the camera this way is you don't have to worry about smudges. You can see how scuffed and stuff this particular filter is. You don't have to worry about scuffs and smudges and that kind of stuff because this filter is not what's ultimately creating the image, it's just controlling the exposure. So as long as it's filtering the correct amount of light, it can really get as scuffed as it possibly can, and it's not going to affect the way that the camera works. So anyway, I just wanted to make this little video because it is the most common thing that I see in regards to people questioning whether or not they should go for a 600 modification. I wholeheartedly recommend that you do it because if you still really, really want to shoot SX-70 film, you can. It's just you do the opposite. Instead of filtering the film, filter the electric eye. And this might come in handy, for example, if you're out in the field and you forgot your film, you left it at home, you go to your local camera store and all they have is SX-70. I don't think that's a situation that has ever existed in the world, but if that's something that you're anxious about, if you're anxious about yourself finding yourself in that particular situation, then yes, you can always revert the speed back. I think that's really all I wanted to say. Oh, the last thing I wanted to say before I get a comment, because I know what's going to happen, I absolutely can predict this. Someone is going to go, shill. This guy's shilling. He just wants to convert your camera to take 600 film so he can get extra money. I see how you're doing it. I see through your plan. Well, I don't charge extra for 600 modding a camera. Simple as that. A lot of technicians do. They charge an extra $50 to $75 US just for the privilege. I charge the same rate during an overhaul. Whether it's keeping the camera original or upgrading it to take SX-70 film, I charge the same. And the reason being is that if you're truly talking about making sure an SX-70 is calibrated and making sure the crusty electric eye is clean and doing what it should, it's about the same level of work anyway. Quite often these eyes get so corroded that even for SX-70 film you have to drop the capacitor by about 200 picofarads in value to get it to expose correct for SX-70 film, let alone 600. So if I'm doing the same work anyway to a client's camera, I'm just going to tell them to get it upgraded to 600 film. It's a no-brainer. They're going to end up with a more versatile camera. They're going to end up with it being easier to source film, and I'm going to end up having to troubleshoot less when my client inevitably asks me, because they don't read the instruction manual, why can't I take a photo indoors without it being a blurry mess? Anyway, I have been one very animated instant camera guy. Can you tell I feel strongly on this issue? But that's what you're going to get with my channel. I'm not going to mince words. If I think something is worth doing and worth doing right, I'm going to let you know about it. And I'm going to try and educate you guys as best as possible so that my channel has the best instant film recommendations on the planet. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one. And yeah, I love you all. I'll see you next time.